purchasing any more oil and gas. That is the only thing.
Started over 43 years.
Everyone. Descovy for PrEP has not been studied in people assigned female.
In a clinical study,
Guide for winter.
The company says parents will have to create their own Snapchat account and kids after a Facebook whistleblower spoke up last fall about social media's impact on younger users. And stick with us. Phil's back with a check of our forecast in just a moment.
The only news in prime time. Dakota News Now at 9.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Allen.
I'm Andrea Anderson.
Urban, rural, suburban, and tribal. And people like Josh came up with his idea for portable electric car chargers 5 years ago in Buffalo, New York. And all the young people out there today who have an idea that spark of imagination to solve a problem they see, to cure a disease they have, to dream to make the impossible possible. This law is for them. Let me close with this. Last month, I awarded Steve Jobs Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously. At every turn of his life, he dared to think differently, embodied that most of American questions. What next? The CHIPS and Science Act is going to inspire a whole new generation of Americans to answer that question. What next? Right now, as Bill can tell you, NASA has a mission going back to the moon, then to Mars, the sun, and beyond, capturing images of distant galaxies we could only once dream existed and we could never think we could see. The CHIPS and Science Act captures that magic here on Earth. It also builds on the progress we've made to rebuild America's with the historic infrastructure law that I signed last year that's going to modernize our roads, our bridges, and deliver clean water, high-speed internet for every American. It builds on another, one of my many top priorities, creation of an advanced research projects agency in health, for health, ARPA-H. It's going to transform how we detect, treat, cure diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer. And tomorrow, I'm signing the most significant law ever to help veterans suffering from exposure to toxins from burn pits. And soon, hope to be signing the Inflation Reduction Act in the law that's going to...
But they don't, and this is a book that takes...
...caused, and we're seeing it play out since yesterday. I implore the FBI and the Department of Justice to release the affidavit. Listen,
let me ask you this, Stuart.
Would the former president, let it all hang out.
Would the former president or his team have some paperwork, like a search warrant, not the affidavit supporting it, but some list of what they took, or some...
Well, so they would have the face sheet, which is the actual warrant which authorizes the legitimacy of any law enforcement agency to go into the premises and conduct their search. It will also reference potentially the violations under federal statute, but they would not have the affidavit in support, which would have generated the authority. The inventory list will be returnable within 10 days, but that will all be returnable under seal. So Donald Trump and his lawyers will not see what was seized, nor will they ever see the affidavit until such time as it becomes unsealed. And generally, an affidavit in support of a search warrant is only unsealed when someone is formally charged. That's why there should be an exception to the general rule. Release the affidavit. Let's see what the urgency is. This idea that they were concerned about the destruction of evidence doesn't hold weight. We know now Donald Trump was up in New York City. So how do you make the argument that they were concerned about him destroying evidence or destroying documents when he's up in New York? So you can't have it both ways.
Jonathan,
it really has now demoralized the men and women of the FBI. It's at an all-time level.
Last thing, Jonathan.
At the very least, have an honest conversation with the American people.
Yeah.
Even if you don't release the affidavit for the investigation purposes, which I've said transparency is a must, at least have the courage to stand before the American people and assure them that their DOJ will not be weaponized. Yeah. It's so important.
Jonathan, last thing. What are we not thinking about here? Is you would think, well, first of all, the Attorney General had to know. The FBI had to know. The President says, the White House says they didn't know. But those men would realize the import and the political considerations here of this image. What are we not thinking about?
Well, that's what's so troubling here is it's unclear why they took this course of action when they could have used less intrusive means. And you keep in mind, of course, that this is the former opponent of the current president and the likely future opponent of the current president. That alone would seem to militate heavily towards less intrusive means. But what is really particularly odd about how this unfolded is that they're saying that they're looking for classified documents that they're engaged in discussion over. Those documents likely were identified. They could have obtained them through subpoena. And so the question that's going to be coming up more and more until it's answered is why this particular course at this time. They couldn't have adopted a course that was more sensational for this moment in time.
As we take a look at that timeline, they were doing negotiations. They were having talks. Keep going to the next slide. And they fell apart. And at some point, they go to get the affidavit. The federal magistrate signs it. It's a criminal investigation. And the FBI searches Mar-A-Lago on the anniversary of the day Richard Nixon resigned from office. Pretty amazing. Panel, thank you so much. Stocks were off today ahead of tomorrow's Consumer Price Index report. The Dow was down 58. The S&P 500.
Top national security officials have been indicted or worse for spilling state secrets. And what's next? We have the receipts, the details. We're back in our shortest break right now, just 60 seconds.
But this is notable because it's very different than what we've heard from Senate Republicans, who've been far more measured in their response. And Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell so far declined to weigh in. Wolf.
Very interesting indeed, guys. Thank you very, very much. Coming up, we'll get reaction to the Mar-A-Lago search from the Biden White House and from a key member of the January 6th Select Committee. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren is standing by live. We'll discuss. Stay with us.
Welcome to your world, your why.
Furniture for the best brand names at the best prices.
Florist reading list for
our floors for 15 years, and we guarantee you'll love how durable and easy to clean they are.
Issues here, Andrew Weissman referred to some of this, that they, the DOJ, are willing to pursue and prosecute and indict and sometimes convict and incarcerate people who were even recent colleagues at the top of the government or served in administrations with them or were in either party or even people who have been viewed by many as wartime heroes. Bottom line, there is a case history here, and it shows that serious people have been in serious legal trouble for even less than this. That's the legal backbone for the dramatic search and raid of Donald Trump's home. High-level government officials have been prosecuted for this related issue of whether you are mishandling classified documents or spilling state secrets or doing anything, especially after you were in office, to endanger the United States. This is serious stuff. So let's get into it. Take Sandy Berger, National Security Advisor to President Clinton. He was in charge of all kinds of national security and intelligence issues while in office, as I emphasized, had that valid role. But after he left that post, just like Donald Trump did, then you're a citizen again. So Mr. Berger lost any legal claim to those top secret materials for the most part, and he was indicted and ultimately convicted for doing something that would have been legal when he had the job. He basically grabbed some classified documents secretly out of the National Archives. This was back in '03, and his reason was, he said, also fair, because he was trying to prepare himself for important government testimony. Then, when caught, Berger at first claimed it was all some kind of accident.
Today, his lawyer says Berger set them aside to read later and accidentally carried them out.
But unfortunately, and he's admitted it was an inadvertent mistake, he shouldn't have done it, but he did mistakenly take the document.
The innocent explanation is the most likely one, particularly given the facts involved.
That was a big deal. He was a big figure in sort of Democratic security circles. It did not end there. Berger busted as that whole defense fell apart. What Clinton said there didn't prove to be right. An investigation found he actively hid the papers, stuffed them in his pockets several times to furtively get them out of the archives, and also destroyed some with scissors. He admitted all of this. Now, what happens when you do that? Well, there have already been reports about Donald Trump in the White House trying to destroy documents in a toilet or a fireplace. The Times has this photo relating to this happening inside a White House toilet. But Mr. Berger ultimately cooperated, something that we haven't seen as reported in the top of the broadcast about much of what has happened at Mar-A-Lago. Berger cooperated, he pled guilty, and that led to an arrangement where he was fined $50,000, he lost his security clearance, he was under 2 years probation, 100 hours of community service, so it was real punishment at the end of the road, although he did avoid jail time with that cooperation. Now let me tell you something else. There's so much cynicism these days, and there's so much trolling and lying designed to just sort of chip away at the reality in front of you. And yet today the reality is that the independent justice system is working, that it is apparently nonpartisan, that it is being overseen by judges as it is supposed to. Now, you know who one of the top prosecutors was who was overseeing this very case, who announced that Berger plea deal? His name is Mr. Chris Wray. At the time he was at DOJ. Now he's ascended to FBI director because Donald Trump picked him for that post. It is Mr. Wray who has been directly hands-on in these key decisions, so he knows exactly how this works, and anyone who wants to bring it up or try to bring in history and politics will have to deal with the fact that Mr. Wray is a Trump appointee who has previously been assertive in this classified area of the law against Democrats. And now it's his FBI that conducted this raid in this classified area of the law against a former Republican president. Now, there's a prosecutor here who thinks there was enough evidence to warrant the search of Mar-A-Lago. Reuters reporting this raid would be approved, of course, the way it works, by Mr. Wray. So all of this is the context. That's just one case. Let me tell you about another one I bet many people remember. David Petraeus. He was, of course, a military veteran, considered a war hero, broadly popular in many ways, and he was CIA director, also served in both parties. But ultimately, he had to plead guilty because he had basically shared or leaked classified information with a biographer with whom he had a relationship, and then later lied about it. He told the FBI he didn't give the information out. And in that case, which was very heavy, jail time was on the table. It went to court, as I mentioned, because of that deal. Judge, in that case, ultimately fined Petraeus $100,000, which was higher than the prosecutors asked for, citing the seriousness of the offense. Mr. Petraeus, though, for reasons mentioned, including his service to country, did not actually go to prison, and others viewed it as all, even still, too lenient.
David Petraeus, who once also headed up the CIA, was sentenced today to 2 years probation and fined $100,000.
Lawyers are citing it as an example of, hey, well, if he got off with that, our guy should get off with a similarly lenient sentence.
So that was going on then, and remember, whether you think that that was a lot of punishment or there could have been more, even that was more than a home search. You had the reputational damage, you had consequences, you had probation in one of those cases. And here you have the ongoing apparent alleged defiance by this person who's a former government official, Donald Trump, of the DOJ. But the bottom line is, and you see it in these cases, no one's above the law, especially not the people who are actually granted these extra powers in office. In other words, as you think about Donald Trump last night complaining about this, out of New York, there's this conspiracy theory that crops up every time with these problems where you say, oh, well, Donald Trump and these people think that somehow they are being treated differently. They need people to think that. The history shows something else. The DOJ is confident because it's gone at these cases before against war heroes, against veterans of both parties, because, and I'm sorry I have to say this out loud, but it doesn't matter who you are and what position you had. If you are endangering the state secrets of the United States government, you are putting people's lives at risk. If you're doing it when you've been on notice and you're doing it potentially illegally, then yes, that, as has happened before, can be enforced as a felony. We're going to get into this.
We look back on this horrific case and talk to the former prosecutor about this latest development for one of the killers.
Well, the Department of Corrections is alerting the public that a high-risk inmate has been released. Officials say 36-year-old Wayne Tobias is considered high risk to reoffend. Tobias served multiple sentences for simple assault, including 2 convictions for assault on law enforcement. He has a previous conviction for similar charges from 2016. Coming up tonight at 6, we'll take a closer look at his past and what prompted the public alert.
Minnesotans have just a few hours left to cast their ballot in the state's primary election. Both Democrats and Republicans will choose a candidate for governor and the state's U.S. Representative District 1 seat. There are also local races as well as a statewide Republican primary for Minnesota Attorney General. Polls close at 8 tonight.
The judge in a 25-year-old dispute over what caused the 1997 flooding on the Morrow River says that he is likely to rule in favor of the parties that brought the lawsuit against the federal government.
I know your committee interviewed former Trump Secretary of State Mike Pompeo today. Was he cooperative?
Well, as you know, we can't discuss the testimony, but I would say he came in willingly, and he did answer questions for quite some time. So we do thank Secretary Pompeo for his willingness to come in and answer the questions that we had.
Well, I know you can't comment on the specifics of the Q&A, but did the committee learn anything from Pompeo today that you didn't know before?
I think we fill in a few pieces here and there each time we interview someone. Obviously, we've had testimony from others about what he said and did, and so it's just a matter of filling out the entire picture, especially on that day and the events subsequent to that day where cabinet secretaries had concerns about the president.
Tonight, the FBI bombshell, the search warrant executed on a former president's home. Agents seizing boxes, including what are believed to be classified documents, and accessing his safe. Donald Trump defiant as the GOP comes to his defense. CBS's Major Garrett is in Florida with the new details. What we're learning about the FBI's investigation, and CBS's Robert Costa on what it all means. An arrest in Albuquerque. Police have a primary suspect in the killings of 4 Muslim men. The chip crunch. After critical supply chain shortages, President Biden gives U.S. chip makers a multi-billion-dollar boost. How long will it take for the U.S. to catch up? CBS's Meg Oliver reports it's easier said than done.
How complex is it to make these microchips?
It is extremely complex.
And moving on, tennis great Serena Williams serves up a surprise announcement saying she's ready to focus on her family.
I can't do this forever. Sometimes you just want to try your best to enjoy the moments.
This is the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jerika Duncan in for Nora. Tonight, there are new details about the unprecedented FBI search of former President Donald Trump's Florida home. What we're learning about the investigation that's focused on his potential mishandling of what could be classified material. Sources tell CBS News that the FBI was met by Trump's attorneys along with the Secret Service. It is the first time in American history that a search warrant has been issued on a former president. And
gas prices falling, and economists now say online prices are falling too. The first decline in more than 2 years. And what about the grocery store? Tennis icon Serena Williams tonight and her very personal reveal, her new chapter. And the extraordinary moment we witnessed, the two Little League players on opposing teams and what they did.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Tuesday night. And we begin tonight with new reporting here after that unprecedented FBI search at the home of former President Trump at Mar-A-Lago in Florida. Tonight, ABC News has learned that the FBI told the Secret Service just 45 minutes before they arrived, and then the Secret Service telling Mar-a-Lago staff just moments before those agents arrived. Sources telling ABC News the search is related to allegations the former president improperly removed documents when he left the White House. They were brought to Mar-a-Lago, including classified material. And it wasn't the first time federal agents had been to Mar-a-Lago, their first visit in the spring. We have learned tonight that it was a staff member at Mar-a-Lago who called Eric Trump, and Eric Trump who then called his father to tell him about the search. The former president was in New York, seen leaving Trump Tower last night, and tonight here the first words from the former president while calling into a political event, saying, "Another day in paradise. This is a strange day." Sources tell ABC News the Department of Justice had started a grand jury investigation in May about alleged mishandling of classified information. Tonight, heavily armed Secret Service agents stand guard at the gates of Mar-a-Lago, and this evening, former President Trump issuing a new statement calling the search a horrible thing. Tonight, what we have now learned about how this unfolded, where they searched, and about pressure mounting on the Attorney General Merrick Garland and FBI Director Christopher Wray, appointed by former President Trump, to somehow explain this highly unprecedented raid. Dan Abrams is standing by on this, but we begin tonight with our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, leading us off.
We're learning new details about the FBI's extraordinary raid on Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago property in Palm Beach. Law enforcement sources tell ABC News that 45 minutes before the FBI showed up, the local FBI field office in Miami gave the Secret Service team in Mar-a-Lago a heads up. The sources say the Secret Service agents did not notify anybody on the Mar-a-Lago staff until just as the FBI agents were arriving. When they did arrive, the FBI agents were escorted into the property by the Secret Service. Sources close to Trump say the club's general manager then placed a call to Eric Trump, who alerted his father. Neither Trump nor any members of his family were there at the time. In his written statement, Trump said the agents, quote, even broke into my safe, which Trump sources say is located in his office at Mar-a-Lago. Sources say the FBI remained at the property for most of the day. Other than his written statement, Trump's only public comment was a muted one when he called in for a Sarah Palin campaign event.
Another day in paradise. This was a strange day. You probably all read about it.
ABC News has learned this wasn't the first time federal law enforcement visited Mar-a-Lago on this matter. A smaller team of agents visited in the spring while Trump was there, met with his lawyers, and reviewed some documents. Since the raid, neither the Justice Department nor the FBI has made any comment. And the White House press secretary says President Biden knew nothing about it.
The president was not briefed, was not aware of it. No one at the White House was given a heads up. No, that did not happen.
When asked recently if former presidents are shielded from prosecution, Attorney General Merrick Garland said this.
No person is above the law in this country. Nothing stops us. Even a former president. I don't know how to, maybe I'll say that again. No person is above the law in this country.
Republicans, meanwhile, are for the most part rallying around Trump and attacking the DOJ and FBI. Kevin McCarthy threatening the Attorney General that he will be under investigation if Republicans win control of the House in November.
You should never use the Justice Department on a political whim like this. And I think that's the real question that we're looking at.
And former Vice President Pence criticized the, quote, unprecedented search and demanded Attorney General Garland give a full accounting. While DOJ has a policy of not commenting on ongoing investigations, Trump was given a copy of the warrant used by the FBI, which would explain the reasons for the raid. The former acting attorney general from the Obama administration called on him to release it.
If you believe this is such an abuse, let us see the warrant and let us decide for ourselves.
That's really interesting. Let's get right to John Carl again tonight, who reported on this as we were on the air in the West last night. John, two questions for you. Former President Trump out with a new statement tonight, calling this, as I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, a horrible thing. But I wanted to go back to your reporting there on the warrant. Does the former president have the warrant, the former President Trump, listing some of what they were looking for, and that point that was just made there, could he release it as part of an explanation if he wanted to?
David, he does have it, and he absolutely could release it. There is nothing stopping him from doing so. The warrant would provide some details on what they were looking for. It's not as detailed as the affidavit. There's an affidavit that would have been presented to the judge that would establish probable cause that a search would yield evidence of a crime. Trump has not seen that, but he most definitely does have the affidavit.
Yeah, the affidavit would be much more detailed.
I mean, he most definitely does have the warrant.
The warrant, yes. We followed you there, John. In the meantime, growing pressure on the Department of Justice and the FBI, really from both sides of the aisle tonight, to release something, some sort of explanation for this unprecedented raid.
Yeah, this is coming not just from Republicans who are supportive of Trump. This is coming from people that have been quite critical of Trump, including Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, one of his most prominent Republican critics, is calling on the Biden administration to release all the documents justifying this raid. And he offered a warning, David. Listen to what Larry Hogan said. He said, if the federal government cannot ultimately provide overwhelming evidence that actions were absolutely necessary, then it will only undermine faith in democracy and the rule of law and further divide Americans. So that a warning coming from somebody who has been quite critical of Donald Trump.
All right, John Carl leading us off tonight. John, thank you for that. Let's get to Chief Legal Analyst Dan Abrams, also with us tonight. You heard this pressure mounting on the Department of Justice. We have not heard from Merrick Garland yet. We have not heard from the FBI Director Christopher Wray, appointed by former President Trump. No question, though, in your mind, Dan Abrams, this went all the way to the top, all the way to Merrick Garland.
No doubt. When you're talking about a search of the former president's home, his private residence, absolutely. All the senior members of the Department of Justice would have been apprised of it and would have signed off on it, up to Merrick Garland.
You heard a lot, particularly from Republicans, but from some Democrats, too, saying we need to know something about this raid because it's so historic and unprecedented. Let me ask you, though, would Merrick Garland, would Christopher Wray move forward with something like this if they weren't really looking for something significant here? They had to know about this backlash, about the role this will play in history.
Absolutely. We don't know exactly what they were looking for, and I don't think they're going to tell us, at least not for now. But it is impossible to believe that this was some sort of record-keeping issue, and that's what led to this massive search. One has to believe that they were looking for something more substantive, more substantial, and that's why they were willing to take the backlash. That's why they were willing to accept the risk and the responsibility of something this monumental.
An extraordinary waiting game, and it could go on for weeks, months.
Absolutely.
All right, Dan Abrams with us tonight as well. Thank you, Dan. We turn to the other news this Tuesday night and a major development in the investigation of the murders of 4 Muslim men in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Police now say they have tracked down the vehicle believed to be linked to the attacks and the driver, now a primary suspect, in their words, in custody. ABC's Alex Brachet in Albuquerque.
Tonight, an arrest in the murders of 4 Muslim men in Albuquerque. Authorities tracking down this vehicle of interest, detaining the driver as their primary suspect.
We arrested 51-year-old Mohammed Saeed and charged him for the murder of 2 Muslim men in our community, Aftab Hussein and Mohammed Faisal Hussein. We are working with the District Attorney's Office on potential charges for the murder of 2 other Muslim men, Niem Hussein and Mohammed Zair Ahmadi.
Authorities saying they located multiple firearms linked to the murders, one found inside the suspect's vehicle, another inside his home. The 4 Muslim men were shot and killed over the course of the past 9 months, 3 of them murdered in just a 2-week span. Mohammed Afzal Hussein was slain last Monday just feet from his home. His brother now saying he's grateful for today's news, but this is just the first step.
We want justice, and we want to know what is the motive under which this shooter was doing this heinous crime.
David, authorities believe Saeed is responsible for at least 2 of these murders, and they'll be working with prosecutors to determine his involvement in the other 2. But tonight, police are saying it was tips from the community that led them to that vehicle of interest and also to Saeed as a suspect. David.
It's frustrating. I believed he was going to run before. I'm stronger in my belief now.
The FBI and the Justice Department declined to comment on the unprecedented search that could mark an escalation in investigations Trump faces from his time in office, including the January 6 probe.
No person is above the law, not even the President of the United States, not even a former President of the United States.
Despite his legal troubles, the former President of the United States retaining a firm grip on his party and eyes on another possible presidential run. Susan McGinnis, NBC News, Washington.
Senators John Thune and Mike Rounds weighing in on the raid today. Thune saying, quote, "The FBI needs to provide answers as to why they raided the home of a former American president. Complete transparency is the only way to dispel the American people's worst suspicions about the agency's motives." Meantime, Rounds said he's waiting for more information, but added that he's concerned the search will be viewed as a political stunt. Rounds also said the Department of Justice should release its findings quickly. Well, another sunny day for us here in the Sioux Empire. How long will that trend continue? Phil Schreck is back in just a moment with that full First Alert forecast. Stick with us.
The I-Team digs deeper.
Taiwan without going to the trouble of so they may well be preparing a blockade. And a blockade, of course, is technically an act of war, but it doesn't carry the disapproval, the international disapproval that an actual invasion would carry.
You know, in general, your audio froze up just a little bit there. You know, that was going to be my next question, which I believe you touched on. You know, Taiwan officials are saying they believe China is preparing to invade. Do you think that an invasion is imminent at this point?
Not at this point, because they haven't done the logistical setup that's necessary. They haven't brought in the amphibious craft. They haven't brought the armor forward. They haven't brought the personnel forward that they would have to move across 100 miles of open ocean to invade. I think it's more likely they're setting up a blockade and try to starve Taiwan out by blockading the sea lanes.
So blockading versus invading.
I believe so. I think that's far more likely because there's far less international disapproval associated with blockading, although a blockade is technically an act of war. Remember, we blockaded Cuba in 1962 and prevented Russian ships from carrying more missiles into Cuba, which was technically an act of war, but Russia backed down.
All right. Well, we will certainly see what happens between China and Taiwan. General William Inyart, we thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Well, if you receive or will receive a pension, you definitely will want to stick around. A new report says state and city pensions are seeing their worst performance in years. We'll talk about what this means for your finances long term.
Senecot laxative gummies.
Care. No child is ever turned away.
Since March, here's CBS's Errol Barnett.
It's a miracle. I was really stressed out.
Around the nation,
I'm thrilled.
A lot better.
Relief has finally arrived.
It means I put more money away in the bank.
Tonight, nearly half of the country, mostly in the South and Midwest, is seeing gas below $4 a gallon, partly due to increased oil supply and fears over a global recession. But American drivers can also thank each other. When inflation hit 9.1% in June, its highest level since 1981, gas prices were a major component, with fuel making up nearly half of the increased costs. AAA found most Americans changed their driving behavior as a result.
We know that 75% of the people said they would change their lifestyle when it hit $5. And our survey, our follow-on survey seems to mirror that. You know, 65% of the people said I made a change in my lifestyle.
Since June, energy demand measured through gasoline deliveries has been dropping steadily. It's now at lower levels than in June of 2020 during pandemic lockdowns. However, weather events could reverse this trend.
We are entering the heart now of hurricane season, and a hurricane barreling through the Gulf Coast, hitting all the areas where there's oil production as well as oil refining capacity, that can cause problems.
Now, the big question is, how long will this last? Well, the good news is gas prices are forecast to hover at or below $4 a gallon for the rest of the summer. But the bad news here is that the energy markets are volatile. In fact, crude oil prices jumped up more than 1% today. So, Jerika, if you do have a fuel tank, fill them as much as you can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Errol. Up next, the new plan to vaccinate more people against monkeypox using less vaccine.
Moving forward with node-positive breast cancer is overwhelming, but I never just found Everpure glossing hair.
Tomorrow morning at 7, we'll have temperatures for the most part in the 60s, so a little warmer than the last couple of days. And then into the afternoon, lots of sunshine, temperatures. A lot of us will be in the 90s, a few 80s in northern and eastern parts of our area. And the humidity is going to be not horrible, but you're going to notice that higher humidity around. And then tomorrow night at 10, things looking pretty quiet. There could be some scattered showers making their way through northeastern South Dakota late Wednesday night, early Thursday, but most of us, I think, are going to be dry. Here's a 10-day forecast now. First of all, for the Sioux Falls area, lots of sunshine tomorrow. A slight chance of a storm on Thursday, but most of us dry. 89 for Friday. Heading into the weekend, looks like Saturday is going to be the warmest day in our 10-day forecast with a slight chance of a storm, high of 91. And basically 80s the rest of the way, and very few chances for rainfall. For Aberdeen and northeastern South Dakota, your 10-day forecast, again, just slight chances of storms off and on, but mainly dry through the next week and a half, and looks like highs will be in the 80s for highs over the next 10 days. And for Pierre and central South Dakota, maybe hitting the triple digits by Friday and then cooling off a bit over the weekend, and then 80s at the end of our 10-day forecast there, those last 4 days, and mainly dry in our 10-day forecast. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break.
Keep up with all the current news on your schedule with the Dakota News Now app. News when and where you want it.
Dakota News Now, sponsored by Montgomery's.
You know that feeling? The world is moving without you, but the picture is...
Get Verizon Business Unlimited.
State Police were able to stop that car near Santa Rosa, New Mexico, and at the same time our SWAT team executed a search warrant safely on the occupied home.
And Wolf, I can tell you, it's a surreal scene. Hours before this arrest was announced, we were inside Mohammed Saeed's home. His family allowed us inside. We could see all of the searching that investigators had done in there. We spoke with several family members who had told us that he had left the house late last night on his way to Texas because he was planning on moving the family there. And he left several hours before investigators showed up and executed the search warrant. Investigators here say, Wolf, that they believe that they have evidence that shows that several shell casings at 2 different crime scenes are connected to a gun owned by Mohammed Saeed. The district attorney here says they will work to continue filing murder charges in all of the cases involving the 4 murdered Muslim men. Wolf?
Ed Levendare on the scene for us. Thanks for that update. More now on the truly extraordinary FBI search of former President Trump's Florida home. Sources now telling us that agents were looking for classified documents. CNN's Brian Todd is here with a closer look at how presidential documents must be handled. Brian, there are very specific rules even for unclassified papers.
That's right, Wolf. You know, we've been talking to former White House officials and other experts who say that generally every piece of paper generated by a president should remain in the government's possession, from top secret classified documents to scribblings on Post-it notes.
The historic FBI raid at Mar-A-Lago was related to Donald Trump's possible mishandling of presidential documents, potentially even some that were classified, that he may have taken to his Florida home, a move that experts say would be way out of bounds.
A former president should not have classified and top secret documents unless the current president and the current administration have authorized it.
Even unclassified White House documents, experts say, are supposed to be handled through a certain process and are not supposed to leave the government's possession, even when the president who generated those documents leaves the White House. CNN previously reported that the National Archives earlier this year recovered boxes that Trump took with him that not only contained documents, but also personal mementos, like a so-called love letter he'd gotten from North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un.
I just got a great letter from Kim Jong-un.
But taking even personal correspondence when a president leaves the White House without clearing it first is not usually allowed, experts say.
It was addressed to an American president. Those originals have to be preserved by law. Now, that is the kind of thing where a president could say, gosh, I would love to make sure you have a copy and borrow the original. I'd like to frame it for my post-presidential office or for an exhibit in my presidential library. And you can have that conversation as long as the law is complied with.
CNN has also reported that some Trump White House documents were ripped up, thrown away, others flushed down toilets. Does even a short, informal note to an aide have to be preserved?
Little posties, you have a little handwritten note to somebody. You're writing on a note card at a national security meeting. These belong to the American public. When Donald Trump took the oath of office, he agreed to this.
And there's a special process for handling classified presidential documents while the president is in office.
They have to be specially marked. They often go in special folders. They have to be stored in special containers, safes, or other secure containers. You can't take them out of certain rooms normally, so you have rooms that are designated as what we call SCIFs. And then there's rules on entering a SCIF. You're not supposed to bring your cell phone in.
Experts say a president can sometimes take copies of some documents with them when they leave the presidency. But that also has to be cleared by the White House and the National Archives, something Donald Trump may not have done.
He was bullheaded and wanted to say, screw you, they're mine.
In response to the FBI search, former President Trump issued a statement saying his home at Mar-A-Lago was, quote, under siege, raided, and occupied. Trump claimed he was the victim of what he called the weaponization of the justice system by Democrats who want to stop him from becoming president again. Now, previously, a person close to the former president denied that anything nefarious took place regarding the handling of documents and other materials. Wolf?
Very interesting indeed, Brian Todd. Thanks very, very much. We'll have more news just ahead. At least one person is dead and several others injured following explosions near a Russian military base in the annexed Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea.
A monster.
Quality products from brands you can try.
Formulated with our dermatology.
National average has dropped below $4 a gallon now. That's down from that record high of $5.03 in June. We'll take it. Economists say grocery prices could start dropping too, since producers and distributors are now paying less for gas as well. And tonight, Adobe now reporting that online prices fell 1% last month. That's the first online price decline in more than 2 years. When we come back here tonight, the powerful moment on the Little League field. Two players, opposing teams, and what they did.
For just a little bit more.
And help take control of your symptoms and ask about Vraylar.
Chief of Staff to Senator Mitch McConnell. Kimberly, your thoughts. The Perry news suggests that that investigation into January 6th is continuing. There's a lot of people that think that this raid in Mar-a-Lago is really about January 6th and not classified materials.
Yeah, I mean, so far they're saying classified. Some people are thinking it's a fishing expedition. Look, both of these episodes are hugely disturbing. We have guidelines at the Department of Justice and the FBI in which they draw lines around politically sensitive topics, especially when we are near election time, because you do not want that department to look like a bunch of partisan thugs. And that apparently has all been thrown out of the window. The news about Perry is particularly alarming, and also in a slightly different category too, because this is the executive branch intruding on and seizing a phone of someone in the legislative branch, again an area that the department has traditionally been very reticent to violate.
Jeff, what about this? I mean, this does seem obviously like an escalation here, and one would think that they'd have to know the political impact of it when they made this decision.
Well, I think it's right to say that there are two sides, there are two ways to look at this. There's a legal aspect to it and there's a political aspect to it. I think the DOJ is focusing on the legal aspect. We asked the White House today to weigh in on both that and the political aspect, and they didn't want to, but there's a definite political aspect to this as well. And I think you've seen in President Trump's reaction, seeking to fundraise off of what happened yesterday and continuing to express outrage and tie it directly to Democrats, that this could benefit him politically, but it certainly doesn't look good for him legally.
Well, to that point, I mean, there were a lot of people, pundits, saying that this was all an effort to prevent him from running in 2024. If anything, you had Senator Lindsey Graham saying, I just talked to him, and I'm more certain than ever that he's running. You mentioned the White House. So let's take a listen to the White House distancing themselves from this.
Does the president believe that the Justice Department acted accordingly here?
That's up for the Department of Justice to decide.
The White House has been told whether or not Attorney General Garland signed off on the search warrant himself.
The president learned about this just like you all did through the public reports, and we learned about this just like the American people did.
So you don't know whether or not Garland signed off on it?
I don't have anything more to share. We have not been briefed on this.
Peter Doocy tried numerous times as well. They kept on saying it's a criminal investigation, suggesting that it's criminal, not national security for leakage.
Yeah, right. I mean, that is a big distinction here, particularly when some of the details have been leaked out about what DOJ was after. But look, when you're taking the unprecedented step of raiding a former president's home, a Joe Friday, just a fax ma'am routine ain't going to cut it, right? You're going to need a lot more transparency than that, or you're going to throw the entire country into incredible political turmoil, which is what we've seen here. In terms of the political gift to Donald Trump, I'm sure that wasn't their intent, but it's absolutely what has happened. I mean, he is once again relevant in the center stage, talking about, and with some justification, that he's sort of the deep state's worst nightmare, which is, of course, hugely resonant with the Republican voters.
But, you know, Republican leaders, your old boss, didn't really weigh in today. They were very cautious.
I think there's an awful lot of Republicans and probably some Democrats who are just stunned by how this all took place and would like to do some fact-finding, right? I mean, absolutely no clue from the Department of Justice about what it is that they're ultimately after here. That's absolutely relevant to ultimately where you weigh in. Yep. If this is what it could potentially be, in a fishing expedition in the former president's home by a potential future political opponent, it's as bad as it gets for DOJ.
Kimberly, last word.
Yeah, well, let's actually look at that legal question. If you're talking about mishandling classified information, that's something that's normally been handled as a misdemeanor. Okay, if you're talking about January 6th, out January 6th committee, there's a lot of legal scholars that think that it is an absolute stretch to think that you could get, for instance, a legitimate conspiracy charge. So what is DOJ doing here? Taking a step that fundamentally is setting a horrible precedent for the future, too, for not much on a legal front.
All right, panel, thanks so much.
Measure just picked up support from some major organizations. Details from our Pure Newsroom.
And a nice summer day turning into a nice summer evening. Here's the planner. First of all, for Sioux Falls, it's clear, it's warm, it's 85 right now. A little more humid than yesterday. Upper 60s to low 70s later on tonight with the sky staying clear. In Aberdeen, a warm one for you. Lots of sunshine.
Cadillac XT4, XT5, and XT6. Visit your local Cadillac dealer today.
Where's she galloping off to this time?
Probably some national news show.
I thought she took our fancy new jet.
Probably does, but she doesn't tell us nothing.
Riding alone. Doesn't she have any friends?
Her staff keeps quitting.
Maybe she should just hire another family member.
Isn't it time for a governor who puts you ahead of her career? A governor you can trust to stay home and get stuff done. Accountable. Transparent. I'm Jamie Smith. Let's focus on South Dakota.
The First Alert Weather Team, only on Dakota News Now.
Tonight, inside the unprecedented FBI search at former President Donald Trump's Mar-A-Lago home. The new details coming in after the FBI executed a search warrant at Mr. Trump's Florida resort. The former president saying agents even cracked his safe. The documents they may have been looking for. Outside Mar-A-Lago, Trump supporters gathering. The GOP condemning the search, accusing the Biden administration of weaponizing the Justice Department. Plus, how could it impact a possible Trump run for president in 2024? Also tonight, the major break in the investigation into the killings of multiple Muslim men in New Mexico. The primary suspect now under arrest. The growing nuclear fears in Ukraine after Europe's largest plant is attacked. Our team on the ground in that city. Plus, our NBC News exclusive tonight, the first cameras ever allowed inside U.S. Space Command. What Russia just did in orbit that has the U.S. now on alert. Snapchat rolling out its first ever parental controls, what it allows parents to see if their children consent. And the incredible moment caught on camera, the Little League batter hit by a pitch. Then, his amazing show of sportsmanship. Plus, tennis superstar Serena Williams, her major announcement about her future on the court.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
And good evening, I'm Tom Yamas, in for Lester. Tonight, we are getting new information on that hours-long search of former President Trump's Mar-A-Lago residence in Florida. With heightened security tonight, you see it right here, flanking the compound. NBC News reporting the search was tied to classified material Trump allegedly took from the White House when he left in 2021. The former president claiming in a statement that the FBI broke into his safe, calling the search, quote, unannounced. Republicans raising questions tonight about the timing, pointing the finger at Attorney General Merrick Garland for executing the search with less than 100 days until the November midterms and fueling talk of Trump's potential bid for president in 2024. We have team coverage tonight, and our Kelly O'Donnell starts us off from Bedminster, New Jersey, where the former president is meeting behind closed doors tonight.
When you got close to it.
Today's spectacle outside Mar-A-Lago.
We're here supporting our president.
After the unprecedented inside, the home of a former president searched. FBI agents spent the majority of the day Monday executing a warrant approved by a federal judge. The FBI's access to the Trump residence and private office was coordinated with the Secret Service, according to an official who says the former president's protective detail validated the warrant and was present during the search. At least one Trump attorney was there, too. Today, that warrant is sealed, so details about what was taken from the Trump family quarters inside the private club remain secret for now.
What we don't have right now is the affidavit to the search warrant. We don't know what they asked for, and we don't know why they asked for it.
Multiple sources say the investigation is connected to classified documents. Son Eric Trump.
The purpose of the raid, from what they said, was because the National Archives wanted to, corroborate whether or not Donald Trump had any documents in his possession.
The former president announced the search himself in a lengthy statement, attempting to set his own narrative. The weaponization of the justice system, he wrote, then made a reference to what happened, speaking by phone for a campaign event last night.
Another day in paradise. This was a strange day.
And this morning, he posted a campaign-style video.
But soon we will have greatness again.
And is now using the FBI search as a fundraising tool.
We pursue justice without fear or favor. We intend to hold anyone who was criminally responsible for the events surrounding January 6th, for any attempt to interfere with the lawful transfer of power from one administration to another, accountable. That's what we do.
Today at the White House, President Biden declined to react to the search of his predecessor's home. And the press secretary deferred a flurry of questions to the Department of Justice.
We're just not going to comment on any ongoing investigations from here. We're just not going to comment on the Department of Justice investigation.
Okay. All right, Kelly O'Donnell joins us now from Bedminster, where the former president is staying. And Kelly, I know you have some new reporting tonight on what the Justice Department and the FBI were looking for.
Well, Tom, an attorney for former President Trump confirms to NBC News that the agents removed about a dozen boxes from a basement storage area. And those agents provided a warrant that indicated that they were looking for evidence of possible violations of the handling of classified materials and the Presidential Records Act, and that lawyers for former President Trump and the government had been in discussions since spring. And tonight here in Bedminster at his golf club, not far from here, the president is hosting about a dozen conservatives who are House members for dinner. Tom?
All right, Kelly O'Donnell leading us off tonight. Kelly, thank you. With that new reporting, I want to bring in our justice correspondent, Ken Delaney. And Ken, we can't lose the magnitude of this moment. Walk our viewers through how unprecedented a move this was by the Justice Department.
This appears to be a first, Tom. Legal experts are unaware of any other time in history when a former president's house was searched by law enforcement agents. To get the warrant, the FBI had to convince a federal judge there was evidence of a crime inside Trump's Florida residence. But even before that, Justice Department officials had to make the decision that such a controversial move was the best way to obtain what they were looking for. Well, the DOJ is not commenting. It's all but certain this search would have been approved by the Attorney General himself, who decided that simply asking for the documents or demanding them with a subpoena wasn't going to work. Tom?
And Ken, because the home of a former president was searched, the big question tonight is, does this mean Trump is likely to be charged?
Not necessarily. It's possible this was a case of the government wanting its documents back. That said, government officials have gone to prison in the past for taking classified documents home, Tom. It's also possible that this is about a lot more than documents. Trump said he did nothing wrong and is calling the search prosecutorial misconduct. Tom?
All right, Ken Delaney in for us tonight. Ken, we thank you. The political fallout from the FBI search of Mar-A-Lago was immediate, with the midterm elections in less than 3 months and former President Trump weighing another White House run. Here's Vaughn Hilliard.
The FBI search warrant is more than part of an investigation into a former president, but also a possible future one.
Now we may have to do it again. We may have to do it again.
Trump this weekend flirting again with the 2024 bid. And today, according to allies, only more inclined.
I talked to the president just about an hour ago. The one thing I can tell you is that I believed he was going to run before. I'm as stronger in my belief now.
But the next election up is the midterms, and the Republican strategy is clear. Stick by Trump, question the Department of Justice.
It's like what we thought about the Gestapo and people like that they just go after people.
If Republicans win back the House in November, the next likely speaker, Kevin McCarthy, tweeted his plan for the DOJ. Quote, "We will conduct immediate oversight of this department. Attorney General Garland, preserve your documents and clear your calendar." Even potential 2024 presidential rivals to Trump flocking to his defense. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis calling the FBI search the weaponization of federal agencies. Former Vice President Mike Pence demanding the Attorney General give a full accounting to the American people as to why this action was taken. A stark contrast to Republican reaction, including Donald Trump's to the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton during the 2016 presidential campaign. The FBI examined her use of a private email server and the extent to which classified material may have been unsecure on it. The FBI search of Trump's Mar-A-Lago property came just 3 months before this year's midterms. Primary season underway now, with a vote in Wisconsin tonight. Democrats today tried to stay focused on the passage of legislation.
To create good jobs, empower workers, grow the economy.
Political wins ahead of November's midterms, trying not to be overshadowed by Trump's legal battles.
A source close to former President Trump who spoke with him this afternoon tells me that Trump is very happy with the response within the Republican Party over the last 24 hours, noting that most have come to his defense. Trump is known for demanding loyalty and has been taking notes on who has been out front and vocal in support of him. Tom?
Okay, Vaughn Hilliard for us tonight. Vaughn, we thank you for that. We're also following some other breaking news, this time out of New Mexico.
Republican nominee for governor of Pennsylvania, who was outside the Capitol on January 6th, appeared virtually before the committee, but he left after challenging its validity. The former president and his former vice president, Mike Pence, are waging another proxy battle tonight. It's in Wisconsin, where Tim Michels, endorsed by Mr. Trump, faces Pence-backed Rebecca Kleefisch in the Republican gubernatorial contest. Meanwhile, Vermont Democrats are choosing a nominee for Congress. The winner could be that state's first female representative to Washington. The government of Taiwan warned today that ongoing Chinese war games are a rehearsal to take over the island and all of the Western Pacific. China began major military maneuvers after Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, visited Taiwan. The Taiwanese foreign minister spoke today in Taipei.
China has used the drills in its military playbook to prepare for the invasion of Taiwan. It is conducting large-scale military exercises and missile launches, as well as cyber attacks, disinformation campaign, and economic coercion.
Taiwan's military also carried out its own war games today. Soldiers were seen firing artillery to simulate defense against invasion. Israeli troops killed 3 Palestinian militants and wounded dozens today in a shootout in the occupied West Bank. It happened during an arrest operation in Nablus. Israeli officials said that soldiers opened fire after Palestinians attacked them with rocks and explosives. Back in this country, police in Albuquerque, New Mexico say they have arrested and charged the primary suspect in the killings of 2 Muslim men. Investigators took 51-year-old Mohammed Syed into custody after tracking down a car linked to one of the killings. They are investigating whether he is also responsible for the deaths of 2 other men. All of the victims were from Pakistan or Afghanistan. A grand jury in Mississippi has decided against indicting a white woman in the lynching of Emmett Till. The teenager was killed after Carolyn Donham accused him of lewd comments and actions in 1955. In 2017, a book quoted Donham as saying she had lied. But today, a prosecutor said that the grand jury found insufficient evidence to indict. Donham is now in her 80s. President Biden signed the so-called CHIPS Act today, aimed at boosting U.S. semiconductor output. The ceremony took place on the South Lawn of the White House. The president said the CHIPS law plus the climate health care bill moving in Congress.
They failed with impeachment 1. They failed with
Most impartial man in Washington.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subpoenas. They made up dirty dossiers. They made up FISA warrants. They lied, they cheated, and they stole. Right? And now you look at the least popular president in United States history, Joe Biden, and guess what? He wants to disqualify the most popular president in United States history, a guy who literally had a rally outside of his Mar-A-Lago home while he was located in New Jersey. That's how much love and support the man has. They know they're losing. They know their policies stink. They're losing on every aspect. Their foreign policy sucks, Jesse, right? I mean, his family's a total disaster, as you see every single day. Gas prices are through the roof. You know, aisles in grocery stores are missing product. Everything's going down the tubes. Gas prices are through the roof. Everything's failing in this country. And everybody knows what a great job Donald Trump did. So guess what? They're going after them and they're attacking him, and it is absolutely a coordinated attack. It's not just FBI raids. It's with attorney generals in states. It's with district attorneys in states. This is politics in the United States, and it's absolutely disgusting. We have become a third world country in terms of the way that they weaponize, you know, what used to be great institutions who should be out there protecting us from terrorists, who should be out there protecting us from school shooters, serial killers. That's the job of the FBI, not sending an entire office, an entire field office, literally dozens and dozens of agents to go raid a president's home, you know, for the purposes of a political party. That's weaponization of politics. That's weaponization of the judicial system, of law enforcement, and it's wrong in this country. And our family has lived with it, Jesse, for every single day for the last 6 years. Before he got into office, while he was in office, and now after he's in office. And Jesse, it's got to stop.
I mean, you just lost your mother 2 weeks ago, and then President Biden sends in men with guns to kick down your door and seize materials from your home where your family lives. That's got to be a little bit unsettling and disgusting, I might add. When you spoke to your father over the phone to let him know this was going down, how did he react?
Honestly, he was remarkably calm. I think we've become a little numb to this world. We understand it. We understand the game that it is, and it's an evil game. It's a nasty game, and it's exactly why my father went into the White House. Is why he ran. He gave up an incredible, lifestyle, Jesse, to go actually fight and hand back to this country. He always talked about draining the swamp, and this is the swamp. It's an evil swamp, but you know what? He opened the window. He kind of defogged the window to allow all Americans to see what our government actually is in the games that are played. And the average American, Jesse, doesn't stand a chance against this kind of stuff. This is a guy who's a billionaire, incredibly successful, with an incredibly loud voice, and he can go and he can fight back, and he does every single time, and he's won every single time.
I think that is a fight that Democrats would be willing to make. Would you think that this administration or the DOJ would be willing to say, hey, we're going to take this to the Supreme Court. We want to see if we can knock him out of the box before he can even announce?
I doubt it. I mean, if he is convicted for this charge, I think they would look very carefully. They would get an opinion from the Office of Legal Counsel. But my suspicion is they probably wouldn't take it all the way up for the reasons that Jessica said. I think the bigger issue here is the threat to democracy that Donald Trump continues to make. And part of that is because he is now reportedly going to announce his candidacy for 2024 sooner than otherwise thought because of this raid. And the reason is this running for president and trying to steal the election and install himself as president is his best criminal defense strategy. He is making this out to be political. That's always what we expected him to do. But he is going to try to use this as a political wedge to get his voters out, to try to install himself, and he will do anything necessary because he views the presidency as safe haven. And he wasn't charged while he was president last time because of the DOJ regulations, and he is going to do everything he possibly can to get back in there so that it will be his safe haven. So the threats to our democracy that started with the first impeachment escalated so significantly, obviously, with January 6th, they are continuing, and I suspect they're going to get worse, not better, until Donald Trump ultimately either loses the presidency or is put in jail.
Thanks, Mark Caputo, Jessica Levinson, Paul Butler, and Daniel Goldman for starting us off. Up next on the ReadOut, the totally irresponsible freakout on the right, including Kevin McCarthy tweeting a threat to Attorney General Merrick Garland.
Records Act. All I want to know is that it's more than the Records Act. That's what I want to hear.
Well, maybe he can say it, maybe he can't. Obviously, we'll keep talking about it. Chris, it's good to see you as always. Thank you.
Nice to see you, too.
Yeah. Turns out monkeypox is far more contagious than we were told. How America's public health officials keep getting it wrong.
A month as opposed to the $600, $700, $800 it is now. Many more people will be able to get health insurance through ACA, and their costs will not go up. So on the health care front, and one other thing, no one will pay more than $2,000 a year for prescription drugs. So if you're one of those people who has these very needed but expensive medications that cost $500 a dose, you're going to be in much better shape. On the climate front, it is the most dramatic change in climate fighting global warming we've ever had, but it's going to mean lower costs for people. The average person's electric bill will go down close to $1,000 by 2030. People will pay less for appliances. They'll be far more efficient and less expensive. And it will mean that we will close tax loopholes on the very wealthy who have gotten away with this for a very, very long time. To boot, we create about 9 million new jobs in the clean energy industry, and those will often go to people of color, poorer people who haven't been able to get these jobs in the past. So this is going to mean a lot of things for a lot of people, and the fact, finally, that global warming will finally get a handle on it is going to mean that people will be more protected from the floods and hurricanes and fires and everything else that's been happening because of global warming.
One aspect of this is drug prices. Those lower prices, caps on drugs that people now count on, those don't go into effect until 2025. That's 2.5 years from now, the government negotiating with the pharmaceutical industry over prices doesn't take effect until 2025.
Right. But the two other things take effect far more quickly. The $35 cap on insulin takes effect right in 2023, as does the $2,000 limit on what anybody will pay for drugs. So it's going to have a lot of effects immediately, and in the longer run, even greater effects still. And once the pharmaceutical industry knows that they're going to have to negotiate, they may adjust accordingly ahead of time as well.
I want to ask you about one of the tax provisions, Leader Schumer. We know that Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema insisted that this provision that would have meant higher taxes on hedge fund and private equity managers be taken out. How does the Democratic Party say we are the party of working class, middle class Americans when there continues to be this loophole for billionaires who are in private equity or in the hedge fund business?
Well, look, Senator Sinema insisted it be taken out. The choice was take it out and not do all those other good things, or keep it in and let the bill die. But we substituted something that might be just as strong, if not better. We're putting a 1% tax on stock buybacks. These stock buybacks also help the corporate billionaires and the big hedge fund holders and things like that, and they do no benefit for people. They just make the stock price go up by having fewer shares. So that brought in $70 billion against the very wealthy, and the carried interest loophole, and I was for getting rid of the carried interest loophole, was only 14.
So the Republicans, including your Republican colleagues in the Senate right now, who are out there saying the IRS with 87,000 more agents is going to be targeting middle-income Americans?
Yeah, well, they're lying. And you know, this is typical of Republicans. They just defend the very rich and then say they're defending the middle class. When they did the Trump tax cuts, they said they were for the middle class, but people learned the vast majority of them went to the rich. This is what Republicans want to do, and we've reversed it. And that's going to be welcome by 90% of Americans.
Senator, the overall picture that this is a, what, $750-some-odd billion bill. Democrats for months were pushing for either a $3.5 trillion and then a $1.75 trillion package. This went on for months. Why not settle for something like this sooner? It would have not only saved time, but it would have meant the benefits that you're talking about would have gone into effect sooner.
Well, no one was ready to do it sooner. The bottom line is that we wanted to get as good a package as we could. Senator Manchin rejected even the $1.85 billion package with President Biden. And so I sat down with him and we negotiated. It took us a while to get there. But just everybody, including the most progressive people, you looked at every senator from Bernie Sanders to Joe Manchin voted for this. Everyone thought this was a lot better than nothing. The choice was not this or something better, because Manchin, Sinema wouldn't have voted for anything beyond this as much as I would have liked to go. The choice was this or nothing, and this is very significant. The most significant reduction in carbon into the atmosphere ever, by legions more than we have ever done. Finally dealing with prescription drugs, finally dealing with those loopholes that the wealthy get away with. This is very, very significant legislation. Now, it's easy to say, well, you should have done more, you should have done it differently. This is a really good package we're proud of. And the American people, by all polling data, 70–80% support it. Even 40% of Republicans support it.
Two other things, Senator Schumer. Has there been a lesson in all of this for you and other Democrats in dealing, frankly, with Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema when you're looking at other priorities for the Democrats?
Well, I'll tell you the overall lesson that I have. My dad passed away in November. He would have been 99 on Flag Day. And he taught me a lesson. You know, he's still sitting here with me. Some of us who have lost parents we're close to, they're never very far away. And he taught me a lesson. He said, if you're doing the right thing and you persist, in his words, God will reward you and you'll succeed. We kept persisting. We kept persisting with Senator Manchin. We kept persisting with Senator Sinema, and we got something, not everything everybody wanted, but something that's damn good. Persist, and you will succeed. Don't give up, and you will succeed. That's been my motto my whole life, and I think we've done some good things. And let's not forget, we did a lot of other things this month. The CHIPS Act, which the President just signed today, will keep the American economy #1 and employ millions of people. We did the first thing in the PACT Act, the biggest thing for veterans' health care in 10 years, so when they breathe in these toxins, they'll be taken care of. For the first time, we've gotten some gun control legislation passed, not everything we wanted, but good. And finally, we did a treaty where we let the two, Finland and Sweden, into NATO. This is all in 6 weeks. It's an amazing accomplishment. Easy to pick holes in it, but boy, oh boy, it's a lot more than any Congress has done in a long time.
So finally, Senator, let me ask you if that's going to make a difference this fall, because as you know, respected analysts are saying that the Republicans are likely to take control of the House, and they may very well take over control of the Senate. Nathan Gonzalez, who is one of those respected analysts, is saying the Republicans likely to pick up 1 to 3 seats in the Senate.
Well, some of the other analysts, 538, another respected one, just said, we're going to pick up seats in the Senate. I believe we will pick up seats for 2 reasons. First, the Republican Party has moved so far to the right, and people are seeing it after the court decisions in Dobbs on abortion and the other court decisions on guns and environment. They've seen it in the January 6th hearings, and they've seen it with the just radical rhetoric and thoughts that come from the new MAGA Republican Party. About 20% of Republicans don't like this MAGA Republican Party. But then people say, okay, I don't like the Republicans, but Democrats, when they're in, can they get something done? And I think we've answered that question with a resounding yes in the last few weeks. I think it's going to help us. I think we will pick up seats.
How many?
Oh, I'm not going to guess that. You got enough out of me.
The Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Judy. Take care.
Happened here, but I did just talk to someone who works in the area, and he says he heard gunfire coming from the area of the Burger King. We have not heard that from police, but someone working here did tell us that, so we'll be following up on that to find out exactly what happened here. For now, we'll be back after these commercials.
Change it up and choose Dutch Boy from Menards. Get the best quality.
I'm not familiar with the stuff that Stephanie talked about, but yes, I know that, he's sort of dismissive of many protocols, but I didn't ever know him to hide or destroy any documents.
All right. Ty, thank you very much. I appreciate your perspective as always.
You bet, Aaron.
Next,
Thank
the
you.
Mar-A-Lago search. All right, unleashing a wave of alarming online posts. At one point, there was actually one tweet every second mentioning the words civil war. And that's not all. Plus, it's another round of dueling endorsements as Trump and Pence's candidates go head-to-head in Wisconsin, another crucial state where polls will be closing soon tonight.
It's time for the biggest sale of the
Walking over to the mound to comfort the pitcher who had gotten emotional. The ultimate display of sportsmanship right there, bringing the crowd to its feet. Okay, and finally, tennis superstar Serena Williams announcing her farewell to the game after her remarkable, nearly 3-decade-long career.
And Serena Williams.
With a racket, grit, and that competitive drive.
That's good footwork there.
Serena Williams changed tennis and women's sports. But now, the 23-time Grand Slam champion from Compton, California, says her next big match will be off the court. The 40-year-old opening up in a new article for Vogue, saying she will be evolving away from tennis after the U.S. Open in a few weeks. Saying, I have never liked the word retirement. Maybe the best word to describe what I'm up to is evolution. Williams says she hopes to expand her venture capital firm and also grow her family, already a mother to daughter Olympia. Williams recognizing the impossible expectations of working moms, saying, believe me, I never wanted to have to choose between tennis and a family. I don't think it's fair. If I were a guy, I wouldn't be writing this because I'd be out there playing and winning while my wife was doing the physical labor of expanding our family. The 4-time Olympic medalist earlier this week alluding to this announcement.
I guess there's just a light at the end of the tunnel.
Williams admits this was a painful decision, but is ready for what's next, hoping to be remembered as someone who transcended the sport. And to her fans across the world, she says, I'm gonna miss that version of me, that girl who played tennis, and I'm gonna miss you. We'll also miss you, Serena. That's Nightly News for this Tuesday. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Yamas. Have a great night.
There aren't words to describe this season.
I loved it.
This live show can make you or break you.
exactly what is happening.
The House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has already said what the Justice Department has done is weaponizing. He used the term, they've weaponized the justice system. Are you prepared to go that far?
Well, no, because I don't know the facts, and I think that would be totally unfair. You know, I think they've had instances in the past where it appears that the Justice Department got political, but I don't think we ought to jump to that conclusion. I don't think we ought to jump to a different conclusion. Let's get the facts out there, and let's hear from the Justice Department is exactly what happened and what interest is at stake.
Well, what has
we
been...
believe in the broad application of the rule of law.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Governor, what has been reported, as you know, is that that there were agents who showed up at Mar-A-Lago this spring and had a discussion with the former president about papers that the National Archives say should have been given to them, turned over to them, rather than taken to the president's own home. If it turns out that the former president took documents that should have been turned over to the government, what should be done about it?
Well, we should make the efforts to retrieve those. Perhaps that is what this is about. But generally, it's not done through a search warrant. There's other ways to retrieve documents through legal processes. And I think what's important here, too, is that the public is not going to get too excited if these documents are routine documents in the White House that the president took out in violation of the Presidential Documents Act. You know, what we'd be concerned about is if these are classified documents, if there's documents that would really be offensive to our national security. This is a serious matter to do a search of a former president's residence, and it has to be justified with equally serious conduct that is at risk, that required this action, and that's the vacuum that we do not have right now.
Governor, we are seeing today that a number of the people who are close to the former president are saying they think that this move by the Justice Department is going to expedite his decision to run for president again. Do you think he should run again?
No, I don't think he should. But I also am a political realist that this is the kind of action by the Department of Justice that without explanation is going to give fuel to those that just say, he's being persecuted, he's being picked on, and they're going to come to his defense, and it very well could motivate him to do that. Fairness is what we have to have in the justice system. I want the Department of Justice to explain what is happening here, give the American public, hopefully, a sense that this is being conducted to support the rule of law and fairly.
And just finally, Governor, you did say yourself in May that you are mulling the idea of running for president yourself. That was in May. This is August. Are you any closer to a decision?
No, that is going to be in the thinking about stage until probably next January. We got to get through this election, and we'll wait and see how that develops. But whenever I say I don't think President Trump should run again, obviously people who are concerned about the country have to give it thought, as I am.
Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. Good to be with you.
And now from the...
Reinforce your skin's moisture barrier.
There she is, fundraising. In Washington, D.C., justice isn't blind, it's blind with rage. And my next guest knows that well. After criticizing Crooked, Tulsi Gabbard was called a Russian asset. She knows what happens when you take on one of the 5 families. She's a former Democratic congresswoman and presidential candidate who joins us now. I'm just angry. I'm sad and I'm angry, and I feel like the country, we're losing the country. How do you feel?
We are. Jesse, this is something that every American should be extremely concerned about, because this raid is just the latest serious escalation of this disturbing trend that we've seen of blatant abuse of power by those in power to not only protect their friends, but to target their political opponents, or frankly, anyone who dares to dissent or challenge or disagree or even question what this administration is doing. And there are a number of examples that we can...
Probable cause existed to believe that a crime had been committed, and that evidence of that crime was concealed on that property. I'd love to hear an explanation. I'd like to see one, but I also think the public does not want to see any consequential investigation like this jeopardized And the Justice Department's going to have to make another very serious decision as to whether or not the making public of the affidavit would in fact compromise the investigation going forward. And I trust them to make the right call.
Do you think that's a decision they've already made, or do you think they're weighing that right now?
You know, I think that they are inclined to keep it under seal. That is the default position of the Department of Justice. Circumstances can change, and different things could happen that would cause them to change their mind. President Trump's lawyers may go into court and seek the unsealing of that affidavit. President Trump's lawyers should have a copy of the warrant itself and the inventory of what was seized. If there is a desire to make that public, they can do that part of it themselves. We'll see how this goes. I think there'll be a constant evaluation in the Department of Justice as we go forward.
It's my understanding that that warrant was shown to former President Trump's lawyers when they showed up yesterday at Mar-A-Lago while this search was taking place. But Senator Jones, what about the point that this is such a serious thing, a serious matter, to go into the home and spend several hours going through the things that belong to the or that are there where the former president lives, and to Governor Hutchinson's point that that the credibility of the Justice Department is on the line, that people, you know, from both political parties are saying we want to know what's going on.
Sure, absolutely. And look, I don't think there is any question that the Attorney General of the United States understands that better than anyone. And all of those that are with him in his staff understand that. But they've got to make those decisions. And I do think this is a different case, obviously. I do think that there is much more that should and needs to become public if it will not in any way jeopardize the investigation. Again, Judy, I think people want to see an independent Justice Department that is going to make the decisions consistent with the rule of law. That's what they've been doing. All along, they have been doing. You haven't seen a bunch of leaks coming out of the Justice Department. They've been doing their work. I've been telling people to be patient. They're going to do their work. They're going to continue to do their work. And at the appropriate time, this will be made public. There will be more information being made public, whether it is through charges or whether it is just through the unsealing of the affidavit. But I trust the Justice Department to move forward. This, again, this isn't a consequential investigation. It's got to be done the right way, and not just done in a way in which the public, who has got all of their news at their fingertips and really wants the news yesterday, demands. They've got to do it the right way.
Well, you are right that the general impression up until now has been that this is a Justice Department that's independent. It's played its cards very close to the vest. We've learned very little. But you now have Republicans in particular looking at this and saying, well, here you go. The Justice Department, the justice system, in the words of House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, have been weaponized to go after President Trump. How do they disabuse critics of that being the case?
They will do that eventually with facts that will come out in this case, if it is the case. And I believe that the facts will merit exactly what happened. You know, what's interesting, Judy, is that it's the same Republicans who for the last few months during the January 6th committee investigation have just ignored all of the incredible, compelling evidence that has come out, and instead said, let's look at inflation. Let's talk about gas prices. Now, all of a sudden, when the heat really gets turned up, inflation doesn't seem to be a big issue anymore. All of a sudden, they want to weaponize what the Justice Department and following the rule of law is. Remember, and this is so important for folks to remember, this is not just the Justice Department. The Justice Department could not have executed this search warrant without the approval of a United States judge, probably a district judge, not a magistrate, probably a district judge, a third branch of government. That's what the checks and balances of the Constitution provide for. So this is not a third world country. This is not a banana republic in which the president or the ruling party can just go in and conduct a raid. They have to go and present evidence of probable cause before a United States district judge, the third branch of government. So there's a lot difference, and they can talk about weaponizing all they want. But there was a judge at the end of the day a judge who sat in judgment of what was being presented and said there is enough evidence here that I'm going to authorize the search of this residence.
Former U.S. Senator Doug Jones of Alabama, thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
You can go to Arby's.
Very authentic thing in the right. They've been pushing this idea that they are persecuted, especially if you saw it at CPAC. You saw that guy pretending to cry in the jail cell, pretending to be a January 6th prisoner, as January 6th prisoners' testimonies played in people's headphones outside of there. They believe that that conservatives are being persecuted. They had a panel called "We Are All Domestic Terrorists" at CPAC. That was ironic. That the idea that if you are a conservative, that you are being persecuted against by the FBI. So this is a real thought, and it's what they're going to run on in 2022.
So a lot of what I've seen also from the right online is even sort of congressional Republican websites have said, hey, you know, if this can happen to Donald Trump, this can happen to you. If these kinds of raids can occur, what can happen to you? I'm sorry, I think of Breonna Taylor, that raid was much worse. I think that 8 years ago today, Michael Brown was killed by a police officer. There are many more instances of police and federal agents acting aggressively than what we've seen here. Is there any sort of pushback that you've seen from defenders of democracy, from Democrats, from just activists and organizers to Republicans trying to frame this as some overstep, when we certainly have seen more dangerous overstep in other places?
Yeah, I think most people understand what this is. If there's proof, there's probable cause, and in this case, probably way more than probable cause, because it's the former president of the United States, an unprecedented step. You can go in there and take documents that he should not have. You even hear that a little bit on Fox News. Guys like Jonathan Turley will say it on Fox News and get shouted down, obviously. But in terms of those echo chambers, they don't allow for that. You do get banned very easily in places like the Donald, extremist forums, for saying basic stuff like that. You're not allowed to bring in facts into these debates. So are you hearing it in the public? I think most people believe if the guy committed a crime, you're allowed to go get the documents out of the guy's safe. But in the places where they are ramping up for violence, they're not hearing that at all.
Right. Ben Collins, thank you so much for joining us on A Readout tonight.
Thank you.
Still ahead, we're hearing a lot of talk about how last night's raid was unprecedented, when in fact it was anything but. NBC News presidential historian, one of my favorite people, Michael Beschloss, joins us next.
We are just the raid at Mar-A-Lago, another escalation in the weaponization of federal agencies, the regime's political opponents, while people like Hunter Biden get treated with kid gloves. Now the regime is getting another 87,000 IRS agents to wield against its adversary's banana republic. I keep thinking about this idea of Hunter Biden being brought up because you expect the unexpected, right? And that is, if a week from now Hunter Biden is indicted or there's a raid on Hunter Biden's house or whatever it is, does the script just get flipped?
Yep. What do you expect? Consistency from our elected political leaders? The flip will script exactly. It'll be how this is. Some Democrats and mainstream media figures will say how this is, a calculated political hit to sabotage Biden after the recent somewhat good legislatively, from a legislative standpoint, weeks he's had. And Republicans will say, no, finally, justice is being served, that this person is being scrutinized. It's all, I wish it were not the case, but this is all so team-driven, and those of us who are consistently worried about civil liberties while still wanting, justice in cases of bad behavior from important political officials, we are left with. You
talk about civil liberties, and it's important. Scott Perry, congressman from Pennsylvania, he just reported that his cell phone was seized by the FBI, and obviously seizing a congressman's cell phone, getting a warrant for that is a little bit different than all of a sudden raiding a former president's office. What level does this have to reach before Republicans, even who tactically would like Trump gone, have to admit, or even those who want him to stay, have to admit, okay, they have something really meaningful?
Well, people only have to admit that once they're actually shown that evidence, right? And we absolutely are entitled, we the American people are entitled to full transparency from law enforcement. If they have something bad, if they have evidence of criminal behavior, I would never be surprised to learn a public official was engaged in criminal behavior, right?
Well,
that is not surprising. Show us the evidence if you have it, and let the American people make that judgment. I don't want the law enforcement making that judgment without the American people's permission or knowledge.
Yeah, well, everything's still sealed, and at least those two folks, the president and Scott Perry, aren't willing to turn over the warrants so far. Hey, Robbie, it's good to see you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Forget climate change. The new billionaire cause day celeb that is uniting Hollywood A-listers, well, you don't want to miss it.
This is NewsNation.
The trading elements that Africa has with other partners, it is actually aiming for a lot less, and by that token, it can actually achieve a lot more.
Aiming for a lot less, Cameron Hudson, but also aiming for military, or at least a...
B.
Okay.
Prizes. Join us for Safety Day on Saturday, August 13th from 9 to 1 at Sioux Valley Energy Service Center just west of Brandon.
What if we said...
In this critical swing state, the winner will face Democratic Governor Tony Evers in November. This is the third time Trump and Pence have endorsed different gubernatorial primary candidates. Trump's pick in Arizona, Kari Lake, secured a win, while Pence-backed Brian Kemp defeated Trump's choice in Georgia, as both men eye potential presidential runs in 2024.
And Aaron, Trump endorsed in another Republican primary here in Wisconsin what appears to be an attempt to punish a Wisconsin legislator for not helping him decertify the 2020 election. Wisconsin Assembly Speaker Robin Vos has been pressured by Trump on numerous occasions, including in a phone call just a few weeks ago, to decertify, to overturn the 2020 election results here in Wisconsin. According to Vos, he once again told Trump that he was unable to legally do so, that he could not do so under the Constitution. Trump then endorsing his little-known opponent, Adam Steen. So we'll be watching that very closely to see how that last-minute endorsement plays out here in Wisconsin. Aaron?
All right, Kristen, thank you very much. An important night there. And next, Brittany Griner's lawyers say they will appeal the WNBA star's 9-year penal colony sentence in the coming days, but you can see how that would go. The only solution may be a prisoner swap, and Ambassador Bill Richardson, who has been talking to the Russians, is my guest. Plus a scary moment at a Little League game, the pitcher accidentally hitting the batter. But what happened next is touching the sports world and way beyond.
It's time for the biggest sale of the year on the Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed. Snoring?
Well, obviously, we had a little extra sun. It was a little warmer today.
Yeah, a little bit warmer, but overall not too... I mean, I'll sweat over anything, whatever. But it's a great day. It's a great day today.
Yeah, we've gotten lucky with the weather so far this week, and it looks like it's going to continue for tomorrow, but that heat is going to be sticking around for a while longer. Here is the current jet stream. So once again, it's allowing all the heat to kind of build back into the region. And not only that, but it's also going to keep a lot of rain chances away over these next couple of days. Our next chances for rainfall will be on Thursday as well as Friday. And that's when the jet stream is going to start to dip just a little bit. So you're going to get the picture here where we're going to see the better rain chances, mainly lining up in northeastern South Dakota and stretching into parts of Minnesota. But then as we head into the weekend, the heat still sticks around overall, and we don't really get much of a break from that just yet. First alert live Doppler radar, some showers and storms right along the South Dakota and Nebraska border. We will be avoiding those tonight. Not going to have to worry about those. 80s and a few upper 70s even further off to the east, but you go west and we're in those upper 90s and triple digits once again.
Against Washington and the West as the sort of have and have not, and continuing that dynamic even with the release of this strategy today.
Cameron Hudson, Khalid Khair, thank you very much to you both.
Thank you. A work of imagination asks us to see race in a new way, from a novelist once again taking on magical realism. Jeffrey Brown sits down with Pakistani writer Mohsin Hamid for our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
One morning, Anders, a white man, woke up to find he had turned a deep and undeniable brown.
The first line of Mohsin Hamid's new novel,
a play on Franz Kafka's famous first line of The Metamorphosis. A man wakes up as something different. Now a direct focus on race.
The novel really began with that idea of a character waking up a different color.
That was the image that hit you?
Yeah, there was a notion that I had of wanting to write about race and identity, and it had been sitting in the back of my mind for many years. But I needed, I guess, a novelistic way into the idea.
You would write a kind of fable with the provocative title, The Last White Man, in which people in an unnamed place begin to wake up transformed.
One thing that the arts and writing gets to do is to remind us that we're sort of making up things as we go along, that reality isn't as real as we might imagine it to be, and that something like race, which we might think of as an actual, objective, real thing, is an imagined phenomenon. And because it's imagined, it can be reimagined. The book is about the loss of something.
The 51-year-old Hamid, whom I met recently in New York, has lived between countries and cultures, what he refers to as a hybridized life. Born into a Punjabi family in Lahore, Pakistan, he spent part of his childhood in California, where his father studied for a PhD at Stanford. He later returned to the U.S. to attend Princeton and Harvard Law School, and then worked in New York and London before turning full-time to writing back in Lahore. The new novel, he says, dates back to 9/11 and how he saw his own privileged place change, losing what he now describes as a kind of partial whiteness that defined him in the world, even as a brown man.
And it was really only after 9/11 that I began to encounter in a more concerted way this notion that, I was someone suspicious. I was somebody threatening, that I would be stopped at the airport or stopped at immigration, or people would behave strangely, if I walked onto a subway car or a bus with a backpack. After 9/11, I was forced to reckon with a different standing. I was also forced to reckon with the fact that I hadn't properly reckoned with it until now. Why didn't I come to this realization without it being forced upon me?
You were enjoying many of the benefits of global citizenship and a kind of elite positions. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that really got me thinking how easy it is to sort of be complicit in something, and then to be forced to grapple with it when you're unable to easily access those benefits.
In different ways, his novels and other writings have grappled with this post-9/11 world.
You picked a side after 9/11? I didn't have to. It was picked for me.
The reluctant fundamentalist, turned into a film directed by Mira Nair, portrays a young Pakistani on his way to achieving the American dream, becoming radicalized. The characters in Exit West were migrants who, with a bit of magical realism, passed through invisible portals into new worlds. So 9/11 changed you as a person. It clearly changed you as a writer as well.
I began to see similarities in different places. And so it wasn't just that in America, for example, this notion of Muslims being seen as a threat. There was also in Pakistan the idea that, Western ideas were potentially a threat, or having a particular secular outlook was seen as a threat. And as I traveled around the world and lived in different places, I came to see that this kind of fetishization of purity, of the real people, whether it was happening in Modi's India or Erdogan's Turkey or Putin's Russia or in Pakistan or in America, was happening all over the place. That we were increasingly sorting ourselves into groups, and that we are increasingly prone to thinking that, that these groups are real and that they are meaningful.
You started this new novel, A White Man Wakes Up Turning Brown. Other novels taking on issues of migration and terrorism in the past. Do you write fiction with a purpose?
I like to spend time in my imagination, but also the world bothers me, and it isn't the way I would wish it to be. And so the same way that my son will walk around the house pretending to be a dinosaur and he's a mighty and powerful, T-Rex instead of a 10-year-old boy, I try to imagine the world differently, and that can be a world where migration is easier. It can be a world where ideas of race are challenged. But all of these things, in a way, for me, are about making the world more hospitable to my way of being, I guess.
I don't want to give away what happens in this fable of yours, but you are trying to see something different, perhaps even better, you're completely comfortable tackling the big stuff in life in fiction.
Yeah, I think fiction is very important right now. You know, we need to find ways to talk about things that allow everybody in, that isn't dependent on, you know, are you from Pakistan or America? Is your skin, you know, lighter or darker? Are you of a Muslim or Christian background? And throughout human history, storytelling has been one of the primary ways we've done that. And so I feel very much part of that tradition. It's not something new. I think it's what we have storytelling for, in large part.
All right, the new novel is The Last White Man. Mohsin Hamid, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Allowing everybody in, that's a great idea. And that's the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Judy Woodruff. For all of us at the PBS NewsHour, thank you. Please stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Then you probably sneak in some hidden and layered fees.
No, we structure.
Governor, what do you say to her?
Well, my foundation, first of all, we don't work for the government. We work for the families, and we don't charge them anything. We do this on a humanitarian basis. But we are, there are 3 other detainees in Russia, plus a POW in Ukraine, an American, that have been have contacted us, and we're trying to help. But I think the first phase, Aaron, is going to be Whelan, and it's going to be Griner. And you know, we're going to continue working on behalf of all these detainees. But I think you have to be practical that initially it's going to be these 2. But we won't forget the rest. We won't forget the rest. And neither will the U.S. government. I commend the administration. They're handling this well. They're putting out sound, strong policies to try to get them back. But now the negotiating starts, and this is what we have to do.
Governor, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Next, a scary moment at a Little League game turns into a remarkable display of sportsmanship.
I'm a fancy exercise.
It's the preseason opener, live on the Packers TV network.
Trying to save the bridge from being bombed.
That won the war against the Nazis. Battle on.
They're always talking about my hair. I actually don't spend that much time on my hair. You'd think I'd be on my hair like for hours. It's simple. I wash it, put conditioner in it, I blow dry it, and then I go like this, and then I spray it. That's all I do.
What you can do with nothing and a little Hellman's.
I hate.
For injuries and illness caused by toxic water, you may be entitled to
Debbie. Be a night owl instead, with late night laughs on Fox.
Whoa.
Yes! This day just keeps getting better.
Fish and chips is a British thing. But Southern Hush Puppy bread.
Watch full seasons, early releases. Possible.
People are dying and
Tell Patagonia's story in some of the most extreme conditions in the world. Patagonia, life on the edge of the world. Sunday night at 9.
With so many nourishing shades, a color change is easy. Nutrice has 77. From our darkest blacks to our lightest blondes. It nourishes violet colors, plus avocado, olive, and shea. Change a little, or a lot. Nutrice, nourished hair, better color. By Garnier, naturally.
Sleek, curly, we all want to fight frizz. Garnier Fructis Sleek and Shine. Argan Oil Plus Cara System. Up to 72 hours frizz control. 97% humidity protection. Fructis Sleek and Shine. #1 in anti-frizz. By Garnier, naturally.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
They're just kids. Right now, they're hungry, homeless, and vulnerable.
As a kid, we don't want you here. They're not our enemies anymore.
Join us Wednesday morning. Ernest Cotter will be live at the SIOUX Affair where it's Agapre.
Cooper 360 next on CNN.
Finally tonight, a true act of sportsmanship, and it happened at a Little League championship game in Waco, Texas. It was the bottom of the first inning when Texas East pitcher Caden Shelton accidentally hit Oklahoma's Isaiah Jarvis in the helmet. It was a scary scene. Jarvis was knocked to the ground. And then moments later, there was this touching scene. Jarvis, who had been hit in the head, walks over to Shelton to console him.
This is really cool because as a pitcher, Bubs
See
looks
that?
shaken up right now.
Well, Texas went on to win the game 9-4. Perhaps we all can be heartened by the sportsmanship that some of the young in this country are displaying. Thanks so much for joining us. AC 360 starts now.
Good evening. We begin tonight with new reporting and new details on the search of the former president's Florida mansion. New word tonight that the Secret Service was told in advance that the FBI would be going in. Also, what the basis for the search was and how concerns about national security played into the decision. So there's a lot of new details, which serves as an antidote to a day's worth of speculation and partisan conspiracy theories and warnings of violence. Let's go to our reporters, CNN's Pamela Brown and Caitlin Collins. So, Caitlin, what more are you learning about the type of documents that were recovered in the search and what they may have related to? Sorry, can't get Caitlin yet. Pamela, you've been reporting on what triggered this search, namely concern.
Through the centuries where the Bolsheviks failed, is that our Constitution separated powers and prevented a uniparty.
From the White House. What we don't know right now is what led to the warrant or if the FBI found anything inside. A day later, we are still waiting to hear from the head of the FBI, also the U.S. Attorney General. Tonight, we do have reaction from the White House and also a new response from former President Trump. All of that in just a moment. But first, senior national correspondent Brian Enton joining us live in Palm Beach, Florida, outside Mar-A-Lago. Brian, tonight I know that you've gotten some new details about the timeline of this search, how much of a heads up the Secret Service.
That he was talking to at the supermarket, the answer would be freedom of speech, freedom of the press, no unreasonable searches and seizures, no quartering of troops in those marvelous provisions of the Bill of Rights. But then I tell them, if you think that a Bill of Rights is what sets us apart, you're crazy. Every banana republic in the world has a Bill of Rights, just words on paper. What our framers would have called a...
Although a more accurate term might be, quote, lawfully executed a search warrant. We are learning that federal agents in plain clothes gave advance notice to the Secret Service, President Mar-a-Lago, and provided them with a copy of the warrant before spending most of yesterday searching Trump's offices on the premises, including, as the ex-president told us, breaking into his safe. We now know that the search warrant was related to the federal investigation into missing classified documents that Trump took from the White House. The National Archives, well, they want them back. At the beginning of this year, the Washington Post reported that representatives from the archives retrieved 15 boxes of documents Trump improperly took. But that was apparently not everything, because according to a new report from the Washington Post, DOJ officials, including a counterterrorism head named Jay Bratt, went down to Mar-a-Lago in June to inquire about more documents. Quote, Trump stopped by the meeting as it began to greet the investigators, but was not interviewed. The lawyers showed the federal officials the boxes, and Bratt and the others spent some time looking through the material. A lawyer for Trump said the Justice Department officials commented that they did not believe the storage unit was properly secured, so Trump officials added a lock to the facility. An FBI agent searched the property Monday. They broke through the lock that had been added to the door. According to Trump's lawyer, the FBI removed about a dozen boxes that had been stored in the basement storage area. While the search warrant left by agents was not shared, Trump's lawyer said that it, quote, indicated agents were investigating possible violations of laws dealing with the handling of classified material and the Presidential Records Act. Worth noting just how remarkable it is that there was a warrant at all. In order to obtain a federal search warrant, investigators need to successfully argue that there is probable cause a crime was committed and that evidence of the crime can be found in the location they want to search. From two branches of government, the executive branch by way of the DOJ and FBI, and the judicial branch, with a judge needing to approve the warrant. And with a case this unprecedented, it likely involved top-level officials at the DOJ, including, potentially, the Attorney General himself.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law, not even a president or a former president of the United States.
No one is above the law, except for Swalwell and Clinton and Hunter Biden. They're mocking you, just as Beria mocked his victims. We've been building to this moment for quite some time. For the last 4 years, anyone who challenged permanent Washington has been targeted by the FBI. They've been waking up to pre-dawn SWAT team raids, with CNN in tow. They're getting criminally charged and bankrupted, not because they committed
investigating that led them to Scott Perry's cell phone. We know that Perry was, integral in pushing Donald Trump's claims of election fraud. We know that he actually introduced the former president to Jeffrey Clark, who was a Department of Justice official who was little known at the time, who was willing to go along with Donald Trump's election fraud claims and willing to, try to stage a coup, essentially, at the Justice Department. So it's not clear if it is perhaps related to that. We reported earlier this summer that Jeffrey Clark's home was searched, so he's been under scrutiny from investigators. The other thing we don't know about what's going on with Scott Perry's phone is what investigators will be able to get from it. CNN previously reported that Perry had had a number of discussions with Mark
and expected when you're the national security advisor. But for that, the FBI ruined Michael Flynn. He had to sell his home. And where's Bill Priest at? Collecting a government pension. No raid, no jail. The same is true, by the way, for Kevin Kleinsmith. Do you remember him? He's the FBI lawyer who...
A big deal that they're coming for a sitting congressman's cell phone.
Yeah, Sir Murray, appreciate it. Thank you. I want to give perspective now on the legal and the political impacts of all these stories. Joining us tonight is CNN Chief National Correspondent and Inside Politics anchor John King, CNN legal analyst Elliot Williams, who served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Obama administration, and CNN Chief Political Analyst Gloria Borger. John, how significant are these new details? The search came after suspicions of withheld materials, that documents at Mar-A-Lago had national security implications.
Well, we have more of a sketch now. We still don't have key information. What do they mean by national security implications? How many documents? What do they relate to? But we now at least have a broader sketch of the urgency that convinced the FBI and then the Justice Department, all the way up to the Attorney General, to take this unprecedented step, to serve a search warrant at the home of the former president of the United States. Now, there's a lot of hyperbole being thrown around. Look, make no mistake about it, Anderson, at some point, the Justice Department will face a credibility test, both in court and in public opinion. That day should not be today. We are early in an investigation, or we're at some point in an investigation where the Justice Department says it can't talk to us just yet. But the fact that they took the extraordinary nature suggests this was a 15-month process. Many communications with Trump and with his lawyers, including a meeting in June that the former president stopped in. So something happened between June and August where the FBI saw a reason, we don't know the specifics, to believe something was at risk, some document was at threat. And just very quickly on this point that Trump has the power to declassify records, that's true. A, but there's a process, and B, even if he declassified everything, they don't belong to him. He can't take it with him. The Records Act is very clear. The documents belong to the American people, and they go to the National Archives, period.
They use pretext to get what they want. Last night's raid of the former president's home had nothing to do with the retention of classified materials. You can handle missing records with a subpoena. You don't come kicking the doors in and blow opening safes. And that's why the feds never raided the home of Sandy Berger, who literally shoved classified documents in his socks, or Hillary Clinton's home, or David Petraeus, who shared military intel with his lover. No raid. The Wall Street Journal, by the way, is now reporting the feds claim this raid had something to do with cocktail napkins and notes from Kim Jong-un. Right.
Warren. And, if you don't know who Warren was, he could match Hunter.
In fact, in those 15 boxes, there was classified material. That might be enough of a basis for the judge to grant a probable cause search warrant to go down and see if there are more classified materials or presidential records or federal records there at Mar-A-Lago.
Another wrinkle in all of this, something that's being batted around about the potential claim that Donald Trump would have declassified any of these documents before leaving the White House. What issue does that pose?
You know, that's a real challenge. I mean, the president, of course, has original classification authority. That means that he can determine what is and what is not classified. It means he can also declassify information. Now, typically, you'd execute a declassification order, but that's not, you know, necessary. The president in the past, as we know, has tweeted out what people believe are classified overhead surveillance pictures of an Iranian missile site. So the president could declassify things in stream. He might argue that before taking those boxes down to Mar-A-Lago that he declassified all the material in there. That may be part of a challenge for the Justice Department in proving up any charges they might bring associated with classified documents, putting aside any Federal Records Act or Presidential Records Act violations.
I mean, obviously the concern, Jamil, with the retention of any classified documents is the national security implications that would pose. Talk about the Republicans right now who are calling this search potentially politically motivated, the sensitive timing of all of this, what this means. You roll it forward to 2024. I mean, there are layers and layers to what they may find and the possible consequences.
Well, look, Marnie, of course, there's always going to be a challenge if you ever search the home of a president, a former president. That's going to raise political questions and claims of political bias on the part of the Justice Department, if in particular, if as here it's a different party. That being said, the removal and improper storage of classified materials is a big deal if you think about it. You know, there are confidential secret materials. Those have to be stored in safes inside of a building. But top secret and top secret sensitive compartmented information, which this may or may not have been, has to be stored inside what's known as a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility. As far as we know, that's not what was done at Mar-A-Lago. If in fact it was any of that kind of material, that opens up the possibility that that kind of material could have been obtained or accessed by foreign nationals, and that's a real problem. Even if the president did declassify it, it's still highly sensitive information if it was classified at one time at the TS top secret sensitive compartmented information level.
Well, and the issue then, Jamil, criminal charges, the possibility moving forward.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there could be criminal charges brought for certain violations of the Presidential Records Act, the Federal Records Act, and certain violations of the Classified Information Protection Act or the classified procedures around that. You know, the hard thing is, of course, bringing criminal charges against a former sitting president, you know, is a real challenge. It continues to raise the questions about political behavior. And even if the Justice Department is successful at bringing those charges and even convicting the president, I think that, you know, there's going to be claims made by his supporters that it was all politically motivated and ginned up. That's going to be very hard for the Justice Department and the FBI to avoid. They have got to have considered that question at the highest levels, as your correspondent pointed out, at the level of Attorney General Merrick Garland. And, you know, it looks like they made the call to go ahead with the search, but it's an uphill battle, certainly, at least in the political arena.
Yeah, well, I mean, to go to these links, gain approval from the federal judge, get to this point, highly controversial. There must be some evidence there, at least you're led to assume that. Before I let you go, what's the next step? How soon before we actually have some definitive answers as to what they were looking for and what they found?
Well, at a minimum, the president likely has, or his lawyers likely have, a copy of the search warrant that was served upon them. They can put that out there, tell us what the basis for the search warrant was, the potential statutes being investigated, as well as what was discovered. That's usually left behind. And so, you know, they could release that. If they don't, the Justice Department probably waits, because they're before a grand jury right now, until some charges are brought. They really can't reveal any grand jury information since there's ongoing investigation. So even if they want to come forward, I think it will be hard for them to do so, and we'll have to see what happens going forward. And the only time this really comes out is if charges are brought, Marty.
Right, and a big if. All right, Jamil Jaffer, as always, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We will continue to follow this as news develops. Also tonight, a massive manhunt for a possible serial killer. The suspect accused of killing at least 2 Muslim men is now in custody tonight. The reason police believe he did it. We'll have a live interview straight ahead. Also, dramatic video just into the newsroom. A small plane crash lands on a busy freeway. This is some scary stuff. What happened moments before it fell from the sky. All ahead here on News Nation Prime.
He spent $30 million resisting efforts to do that. George Bush had an executive order and said, you know what, I'm not going to do this. And that was adjudicated. And now we go after a president and go to his house with 30 agents. In the past, when a high official was called for a congressional subpoena, Eric Holder just said, I'm not going, and I'm not turning over any of this fast and furious. The idea that you would put him in shackles or you confront him with his family and grab his phone is just ridiculous. But this is what we're doing on ideological basis. And when you start to do that, you don't have a democracy anymore. And I don't.
You argue that this warrant is potentially instead about neutralizing a national security threat. Tell me why.
Yeah, I think things get more complicated when you have national security interests involved. You know, the Department of Justice has two different divisions. They have the National Security Division, they have the Criminal Division, and sometimes these divisions have different goals, and sometimes they are even working at cross purposes. What I think could be happening here, this is just one possibility, and I say this to manage expectations, is that the primary goal here was simply to retrieve these documents which present a grave national security threat. For example, if some of these documents included information about new defense technology, say, that the United States is developing, maybe Trump just thought they were cool and he just has them. He's not doing anything with them. But we know that, say,